Hi, David. Hi, everyone. Hi, Michael. Hi, Cosmopolite. Hi, Opal Fruit. Hi, Michael Morgan. I can see people coming in. Hi, Yost. Yost, Dion. Fires and Sea. Hi, Cloud. I don't know if I've got that right. I'll start a chat down the side as well. So if anybody wants to write anything or say hello, just start your chat down the side. Not a problem. Hi, Sanjam. Hi, Dion. I think that's everybody who's in so far. I'm not sure how many people will actually end up coming tonight. And I've opened a bit early because when I do, it's interesting, when I do healthy mental practices at LAM, London Alternative Market, that's what it is. It's a Q&A, and this is how these started. But I've noticed people really like a subject. So we'll see how it goes. Good evening. Howdy, Opal Fruit. Dion, good evening as well. Hello, everybody. Just wait to make sure everyone comes in. Just check in security as well. So they can't share whiteboards. You can do a video. You can't unmute yourselves. You can rename yourselves and you can chat. And if something goes wrong, I'll just close the chat as well. I'm really sorry, but till we get rid of people. So hello, everyone. Hello, Explorer. Good evening. Hello. I'll just wait and see how many people come in and we'll take it from there. And just a reminder, if you are any form of psychotherapist or therapist or counselor or psychology or psychiatrist, you can email me and get a free CPD certificate for this as well. So don't forget that. Hi, Fires and Sea. Nice to see you all. Hello, everyone. Nice to see you. Hello. We'll just wait a few more minutes and see who else pops in, and then we can start. While we're waiting for everyone, can I just please remind you, don't have a problem if your cameras are on. I do have a problem if you are naked or wanking or anything else as well. We have had about 4 wankers in. I don't see what the thrill is. Jesus Christ. I don't get it, but it's about them exposing themselves, I'm sure. And that really is what it's about. So each to their own, I guess. And that's not what this space is for, however. Hi, Andy. Hope you're well too. Couldn't do my car, wrong blooming part sent from the garage. Oh, no. So for those of you who don't know, earlier, just a minute ago, Andy wrote that on FetLife and was saying, oh, I might be late because my neighbour's helping me with my car. That's what he was saying. So I really understand that. I've been waiting 10 weeks for a fridge freezer, and without a fridge freezer, 10 weeks. And they sent the wrong one the day before yesterday. So I'm probably getting the right one tomorrow. It's frustrating as fuck, isn't it? It's the sort of stuff that can frustrate me to tears, that sort of shit. Hello, Ruby Red Rabbit. Hello, Nice Kitty 68. Everyone's saying hello, everyone, which is really lovely. So just a reminder on the rules, please do think about, you know, being kind to other people. Don't mention about how anybody else looks. Don't say anything that's unnecessary. Be kind. If you've got something to say, please type it down the side. And please remember that these things are being recorded. And we put them on YouTube and we put them on FetLife as well. So if you don't want your face on, make sure your video's off, because it will be there and it will be around. So please think about those things. So I've had a variety of questions for today already. And then if we've got more time at the end, anybody can ask any question they want. It's quite a big deal, isn't it? Any question you want, like, will I know the answer? I always think that every time I do one of these, it always scares the shit out of me, because people could ask anything about anything, really, couldn't they? Because I say I'll answer questions on anything to do with kink, psychology, communication, relationships, polyamory, sex, sexual problems, all of those things. So, you know, that's a really wide, vast topic, really, but we'll see if anyone else has some different questions later as well. So I've got 3 or 4 questions to start with that I've already been asked. And if you've got an idea or you want to say something, please type it down the side, because I'd love to read it out. It's not just about me saying, hey, this is what I think. If you've got something to say, please do type it down the side. As I say, if you've got a question, let's hold it till a bit later and then we'll see where we go with that. But one of the first questions I was asked earlier was about, so I've written them down here, so I'll just double check, fluid bonding in polyamorous relationships. So is anyone here poly? Anyone heard of fluid bonding? Anyone into being fluid bonded, or anyone is or isn't fluid bonded for different personal reasons? And the person was saying, what do you think about fluid bonding and polyamory? So it's an interesting one, isn't it? fluid bonding, polyamory, fluid bonding, monogamy, actually. I think what happens is when we talk about fluid bonding, we tend to think that that just means, for some reason, not all the time, clearly, but a lot of us take it as that means that that is penis and vaginal sex without a condom. That's the most common time it's thought of, that it's unbarriered, or penis in arse as well. So like it could be either. So it's anal or it's vaginal sex without any form of barrier. That's a little bit of a fallacy that we've gone down over the years. And it's also got a lot of monogamous overtones, but I'll come into that in a minute. So if you agree or disagree with me, please do say, and write down the side and say what you think as well. Because, you know, people comment and people say different things. So it's about bodily fluids. And the reason we fluid bond, in theory, is for safety. I'm going to argue it isn't just for safety. I'm going to argue it's for exclusivity. It's a little bit elite. And it's also a little bit about hierarchy as well. That might be quite controversial to some people in some respects. But we ask people if they're fluid bonded. What a lot of people do when we first meet each other, if we start having sex, doesn't matter what, it really doesn't matter what gender we are, who we identify as, is about if we have some form of sexual activity. And we can even take sexual activity as kissing. So lots of fluids in the mouth, lots and lots of fluids in the mouth. Probably, actually, not probably, this is true. Some of the fluids in your mouth, some of the bacteria in your mouth is way worse than some of the bacteria that's in your arse. So we only talk about fluid bonding when it comes to actual PIV or PIA, which is quite interesting. Why do we only classify it as that? So some people would say, I don't know if I can trust you yet. I don't know who you've slept with. I don't know what you've done. It's interesting. I'm going to trust you to put your hands around my throat or do something quite different, but I'm not going to trust you to come inside me or anything else as well. So, or my arse, or for us to exchange fluids on some level, maybe you'll spit inside my mouth or spit or do something, fluids. And a lot of people will turn around and say, no, we can't do that yet. We must all go to the clinic. We must all make sure we're clear. We must take a lot of tests, which I fundamentally agree with. It's a really good idea to make sure. However, a lot of things don't show up in those tests, and a lot of things actually come to bite us later, but I'll go on to that one in a minute. So we might turn around and say that we're fluid bonded, so we'll stop using anything. But does that mean a dental dam? Does that mean a condom? Does that mean some kind of gloves if we're fisting? Like, what does fluid bonded mean, and what will it stop? What will change here if we fluid bond in this relationship? And the person was really asking about polyamory, and I will come on to that in a minute as well. When we live in the sort of Western world that we live in, it's very much seen as that's the way it is, that it's risky behavior if we fluid bond, if we don't know what the other person's got or hasn't got. So Cosmopolite agrees that it's hierarchical, and I'm going to come on to why I think so in a minute. So we'll have a look. But it's interesting because we think that we're really safe if we're using some kind of preventative condom, something in some way, shape or form. However, and I've spoken about STIs and different things before. Now, bacterial vaginosis is not an STI, and neither is thrush. However, even if we have some form of condom on, or some form of glove on, or some form of barrier, let's just say barrier, if we use barriers, we can create bacterial vaginosis, and we can create some form of thrush. That might be because the bacteria is upset, where it's all wet and damp and moist, and it might just be that there's irritation occurred. People can get thrush and BV and not ever have sex. You can have BV if you're a bloody virgin. You can have thrush if you're a bloody virgin. It's not connected to sex. However, the more sexual partners we have, the more irritation we create, the more likelihood is that something like that could happen, because it upsets our natural balance, our natural flora, if you like. And of course, if we add something in like semen, and that's in a vagina, then we've got a massive mix going on for the end of the penis, and we've got a massive mix going on for the whole of the vaginal wall, all everywhere. As soon as we're in, that's it. However, what we do forget, and I think it's really important to be aware of this, even if you have barriered sex, you are still open to HSV. And you're still open to chlamydia, gonorrhea, hepatitis, HIV, and syphilis. They are still potentially catchable, I fucking hate that word, you know, they can still be caught and passed on, even if we're having barriered sex of some way, shape, or form. So we can get HPV, we can get HSV, we can get chlamydia, gonorrhea, syphilis. Did I cover all of them? I think I did. And HIV. Is that all of them? Hepatitis as well. So cutting blood, different things for different reasons, depending on sort of hepatitis. And I've done workshops on STIs and how we can pass them on. But people have got this idea of, no, I must have barriered sex. You can still get all of those things, even if you have barriered sex. So we see barriered sex as a little bit of a catch-all that I will be safe if I have barriered sex. That's not necessarily the case. Are the statistics higher and greater if you are having unbarriered sex? So yes, so if you have fluid exchange of any kind, your odds now go up statistically as to what you could get, and all of those things again, plus a few more. But lots of these are skin-based, viral-based. Lots of these are about where they are on your body as well. So that it's not as clear-cut as, I know we must put a condom on, we must put gloves on, we must put a dental dam on or something else as well. So fluid bonding is quite interesting because we have this strange fallacy in our world that, oh, if you get tested, we're safe. But, you know, some HPVs won't show up on a test. They really won't. There isn't a test for, I mean, there are some specific tests for HPV, but a lot of people don't do those tests, and a lot of institutions don't do those tests either. So we are taking a risk. And actually, somebody might not have very active HPV, warts and different things, but once they've been diagnosed with warts, they are in your system for at least 2 years. Even if they're burnt off, burnt out, and they're gone physically, they are still there. The potential for that to be passed on is still there for at least the next 2 years. So we should be having what? Like a massive condom all over us with just a tiny penis or a finger or a tongue sticking out. But even then, things can pass. So it's quite interesting. We're not as safe as we think we are when we start talking about fluid bonding and barriered sex. So if you really want to have a look as to where you should go, please make sure that you look for your local STI figures. You can find them. They are published. Not for individuals. You're not going to say, oh, I know, Opal Fruit's got this list, or Cosmic's got this bit, or of course they haven't. Deb's got this list. And we haven't. We have to rely on some kind of openness as well. I would also argue that people really have no idea often about these things. The amount of times, so I get cold sores around my mouth and I get cold sores around my nose. I'm absolutely clear about that. Everybody knows that I get them. I put it on my profile and I tell everybody that I have any form of sexual contact with. I can't tell you the amount of human beings who will turn around and say to me, oh no, it doesn't matter. I can't get anything from that. You can still give me a blowjob. Or don't worry, you can still go down on me. If we're doing things like that, we're still passing stuff over, and we are potentially causing lifelong, life-altering conditions. So fluid bonding is quite interesting. There's a lot of social conditioning around fluid bonding that says, this is the way it is. This makes us, it's almost like a marker in a lot of relationships, that it's something that we have to achieve. So you and I become fluid bonded. That's a tick to say that we're a bit more serious. We're moving on a bit. We're doing things differently. But it doesn't really necessarily mean that. It means that we've both been tested and we can have fluid-based sex. Of course, you can also have people who are allergic to each other. I think it's a 0.07% chance. It's under a percent. Can't quite remember exactly what it is, so I apologize. And I have actually had a client in London, God, this was about 15 years ago, who was allergic to her partner's semen. And they were a heterosexual couple. So every time they had sex, she ended up in pain. She ended up with a rash. She ended up with all sorts of different things. So that can happen as well. And of course, I mean, it near enough destroyed them, really. Their relationship did break up in the end. How do we get over those sorts of things? And fluid bonding wouldn't have meant anything to them. They can't. They were for a while. They had to go back to condoms. So this is such a personal thing when it comes to this, but we tend to take fluid bonding from a perspective that says it's something to achieve, that it's something that we should be doing. And it makes sex just about penetration, and sex isn't just about penetration. Sex is about many, many other fantastic things. And it seems to be this goal that if we penetrate in some way, shape or form, whether it's a hand, a tongue, a fist, a cock, doesn't matter what it is, a foot, I don't care what it is, that if we shove something inside somebody else's holes, that somehow we are more than or greater than anybody else who doesn't, for whatever reason. And that's just not true. So I think we have to, I'm going to log out and come back in, as I seem to have lots of loss of volume in my phone for some reason. Sorry about that, Andy. Can always watch the recording afterwards, but come on back in, you'll be welcome. So it's interesting that we take fluid bonding so very seriously. And I think we take it seriously. And I've said I'd come back to it because it's hierarchical and because it's emotional. There are lots of writings out there about this, and a lot of us have been saying this for a very long time. It seems to be something that we have to achieve. Right, so somebody just said directly, so closed three-party fluid bonded with testing poly isn't as potentially dangerous as between two people. If a group of people, it doesn't matter if there are 12 of you and you have all been tested, it's no more or less dangerous, apart from the fact that there are more people in it than whether it's 2 people or 12 people. The statistics change it slightly. So does the danger take it? Well, the danger comes in around how many people can we trust? The danger comes into, can I trust that person's partner that I've never met before, or that person's partner's partner that I've never met before? It could be we can only trust as much as the tests show what we've got and what that means. And some of the tests don't show everything. So fluid bonding is quite interesting when it comes to this. You can have a closed group that are fluid bonded, and you're only as weak as the person who doesn't follow the rules on that. So this is part of what we've got to do. If you want a fluid bond with a group of people, especially if it's 3, 4, 5, 6, is you have to agree, what is the fluid bonding? What does that mean? So when we fluid bond, what does that mean? Does it mean that we have unprotected penetrative sex? Does it mean that we don't use gloves? Does it mean that we have fingernails and we fist someone vaginally or anally? What does it mean? Now, of course, that's not always, welcome back, Andy. That's not always about fluid, but that could come into this conversation because it is about overall safety. As I say, we get fixated on just the fluid. So we get that conditioning of this makes us really special. So if 5 people are special, how is that special enough for the 2 people? So for some of us, some of the time, and Cosmopolite picked up on that, is that it can feel hierarchical. So sometimes in poly, somebody might say, no, we're fluid bonded. You may not fluid bond with anyone else. And that's an emotional decision. It's very rarely a safety decision. It's 9 out of 10 times an emotional decision that says, I don't want you to do that with anybody else, or I feel insecure, or I feel worried about that. Now, statistically, it might be a safety decision. And also people lie. If you think that people cheat, and I think we have this fallacy as well, that when we're polyamorous, people don't cheat, and that's just a ton of shit. Polyamorous people cheat. People cheat. Any gender cheats. Human beings cheat. Whether we're serial monogamous, which could then take us into some kind of danger because we're having more and more activity. There was also, if you look back at the 60s and 70s, when we take that stereotypical 60s housewife at home, I'm being a bit facetious here and I'm really gendering people and putting people into corners, I understand that. When we take that typical 60s housewife and we then go into the 70s and 80s, a lot of those housewives ended up with lots of STIs and STDs, and they didn't sleep with anyone else apart from that one person who was their husband. So it also isn't about sleeping around. That just increases the chances. It is about that in that it increases chances, but really it's about trust, isn't it? It's about, what does fluid bonding mean to me, and how do I trust you if we are going to fluid bond? So we need to turn and say that if we're going to do that, that we have a set period of time where we use some kind of barrier, and then we get tested, we wait for all the test results, and then we start to have a look. And then there'll be a time as well that we should test that fluid bonding. What I mean by that is, does it upset flora? Does it give somebody some kind of thrush or BV? Does it give somebody some kind of, we can have a lot of sex and we end up with honeymooner sex. So honeymooner cystitis, when we're having a lot of sex, we end up with a lot of different things because of irritation as well. So we need to give our flora a chance to calm down before we add lots and lots and lots of different fluids into the mix. Are there any studies that show cheating amongst people who claim to be monogamous versus people who claim to be non-monogamous? Not that I've seen recently, not perfect studies that compare. what we know is humans cheat, and what we know is it's around 50% of them. If you look at all the statistics that are done, so in polyamory and all the statistics that are done in monogamy, I mean, you could take them together and probably compare them. You'll probably be able to find something. It's always around 44 to 54. It's that mid 50% of human beings that simply cheat on each other. So it's kind of like a 50-50 chance, isn't it, that the person is cheating or isn't cheating? I think it's really difficult because we put polyamorous relationships and kink relationships high on the trust bracket, where we say that we really have to trust the other human being. Way to soothe my anxiety. I know, but I'm not here to soothe your anxiety. If anything, what I want you to do is to think long and hard about these things. I don't want you to be anxious about them. I want you to be aware of the facts. And then we can make different decisions that may or may not be good, better, different for us. Yeah, fair few idiots landed in my DMs this week, all in the longs of like, my partner cannot know what I'm doing, but I need a sub. Just, yeah, you know, I got a message from somebody, I don't even know who this person is, like 23 years old, on my kink shrink profile. And he said, hi, download Messenger or Telegram or something or whatever. And I just wrote back, why? And he said, so we can talk. And I wrote back, why? And he said, but I would really like to talk to you. And I said, why? And I think this went back and forth for quite a few messages. I was just having fun, really. And he wants to sext, and he's like 20 something years old, and that's fine. I don't mind that he wants to, but it shows he doesn't know who the fuck I am or what it means or anything. So there's no care. So we ask for fluid bonding very early on, often before we have care. What does fluid bonding even mean to you? Do you include a kiss in that? Do you include spitting? Do you like drooling into somebody's mouth? Do you like pissing into somebody's mouth? Isn't that a form of fluid bonding? And I say to people, they're really not aware sometimes that urine is not, I mean, fucking I've got a massive writing on this. Urine is not sterile. Let's get rid of that shit. That's another story. Let's get rid of that shit stuff that's been turned around and been done. Yes, and I agree. So somebody just wrote to me as well, and blood play. What are we going to do? Are we going to open up? I mean, Jesus Christ. And if we're going to have anal as well with fluids mixing in, and we look at everything that, what you've got in your ass as well is you've got a lot less. So everything then, the membranes, it's all a lot thinner and it gets a lot more damaged. And as soon as that blood gets involved and the semen gets involved, or spitting, or when you think about some of the really drug-based parties that some people have, so we're talking about chemsex as well, sometimes you get a recipient who's literally half passed out with their arse in the air, or cunt, you can have whatever you want, a hole, and people are just spunking into it, spitting into it, doing whatever they want into it. That's the whole game. There are also people who are bug chasers and bug givers, and people don't realize that these people are around as well. I know I've got something, I want to give it to everybody. I had a client who was 18, 19 years old, absolutely beautiful. I ended up going to the police about her. I really worked with her so hard for quite a few times because she unfortunately caught herpes from somebody. They knew that they had herpes. She was so fucking angry about having caught herpes that she decided to sleep with as many people as she could whenever it was active and not tell them. So she wanted to infect as many men as she could physically. And that is a very serious crime. And it's not funny. Like, it's really not funny. So, you know, trying to talk to her about awareness, about social responsibility was really hard. So, Andy, you say you would have thought it's fluid bonding. So again, see, that's what I mean. It needs a discussion, doesn't it? So is it more of an emotional subject or is it a risk subject? And I think you have to be aware when you're talking about fluid bonding as to which one that is for you. But also, how do we check in every so often? How do we make sure? How often do we get tested? Every 3 months? Every 6 months? And I think you have to take some other things into account. So I just talked about piss. What we've been taught a lot about over the last couple of years because of COVID is if somebody is immunocompromised. Now, thank fuck, we've really started to learn about people who are immunocompromised because plenty of people are immunocompromised. I remember, so like, for example, when you're having chemo, I remember, gosh, I was neutropenic so many times. And at one point, my neutropenia level was 0.2. I was in this bleached room. It's not really bleached, but that's what it felt like. People couldn't come in unless they had masks and gloves and hats and aprons on, because if I'd have caught something, the likelihood of it killing me would have been high. 10% of neutropenic patients die because of a basic virus that they catch. When I was taken out of hospital, I remember going out with my daughter. I needed to get some money because I had builders in at the same time. I came out and I was wearing a mask because I was scared for my own health. I remember going to a different ward in the hospital when they said I was slightly better with just three people in, and one person couldn't get out of bed and one person was very ill. And I went to go into the toilet just before I was going to get my IV antibiotics. And this person had clearly the shit dance, squatted, spun 3 or 4 times like the devil and just shat everywhere. And I remember saying to them, I can't risk going anywhere. I'm really sorry about whoever's got to clear that up. And then put me in a private room, or like a single room immediately, because it's really risky because of immunocompromisation. And people are immunocompromised for lots and lots of reasons. It could be their health, it could be an illness, it could be a disease, it could be so many things that they've got. Lots of people still have fantasies around scat. I mean, that's more than fluid bonding, isn't it? Especially if somebody wants to shit in your mouth or directly into your mouth. And people do. They might want to shit onto your chest or do other things as well. It really changes things when they want to shit and put it anywhere near any of your orifices, being your arse, your mouth, or your vagina. So your cunt, your vulva, any of that stuff. E. coli, different illnesses, different bacteria could really cause huge issues. So we really have to think about the consequences. So is it really dangerous to be not fluid bonded with some people here, or be fluid bonded? What's best for all of the partners involved, rather than just, I want to get my rocks off? So we have to think about that. Is it really, do we have to be careful? We also know the more STIs you have, the more likely you are to get different ones. Does that mean that's because you've already had one, or does that mean because you have a lot of sex? No one knows the fucking answer to that. Not really. That hasn't been researched enough, so we're not sure about it. Do we know that this is about something that's okay or not? So I have definitely caught a few things in the past. I mean, like even crabs, for example. So pubic lice, definitely caught pubic lice when I think I was 19, 20 at the time. And, you know, I remember saying to this person, how on earth did I catch these? I'm only sleeping with you. And he played that whole thing of, oh, I don't know, you know, like it can't have happened. And of course it fucking was. Like, you know, it's a real sign sometimes, some of these things about infidelity, and sometimes it isn't. Cinder says the eyes are also great with spread infections, well, anything with epithelial tissue, so that includes the nose too. So yes, so another reason why we're so really dangerous if we're having things like chemo is all of our hair disappears, which means the mucus, the stuff that's running from our nose, and how thin the tissue is, which is what Cinders is talking about. And actually, my aunt, I remember her having cold sores in her eye, the eyeball. That ain't pretty. Trust me, that ain't pretty. And it looks so incredibly painful. So there are all sorts of things that we need to think about. So what is fluid bonding? So first of all, that's the question you need to answer. What the fuck does it even mean? Is this about our fear of STIs? Is this about us health and safety, or is this an emotional question? So we need to answer all of those before we decide these things. It can also be that somebody turns around and says very clearly to somebody else, oh no, I want to fluid bond with somebody else. And you will say, but I don't want you to. What are you going to do then? You then need to work out your boundaries, because if that person isn't respecting yours, how do you hold on to them and what do you do? And that's really important too. So fluid bonding is really, really interesting. So do you want a fluid bond because it's good for you? So I said condoms. Can you explain that a little bit? What do you mean by, I see. You must use condoms, or you have to use condoms with me. Is that what you mean by that? That could be one of your things. But as I said earlier, there are so many things that spread even without condoms. And I think we really have to be aware of this, because a lot of people turn and say, yes, you can use a condom, but please don't forget, even if you use a condom, you can still get a shit ton of STIs and major, major, major problems that could last with you forever, that there are no cures for. And I think we have to be really careful about this. So if we get HPV, there are over 200 and something, or even more than that, forms of HPV. Human papillomavirus, so that's warts and different things, and they can cause cervical cancer, which is why we have the jab nowadays, whether we ask young people to take, especially if they haven't had sex yet. We really want them to try and get some form of vaccination, because it could stop cervical cancer. So, but that doesn't stop with a condom, and that's a major, major problem. HIV isn't always necessarily just fluid, just as in, you'd be amazed, honestly. Of course it's fluid, it makes a difference. However, it doesn't take a lot. So like, you know, how many people have had sex and said, yeah, but I'm just hard. But there's pre-cum and there are other fluids involved. They just talk about coming, it doesn't matter, or I withdraw. Fluids leak out of us all the time so we can catch everything. So even then you put a condom on. So then you can get things, like I said, like thrush, you can get HPV, you can get HSV, you can get chlamydia, gonorrhea, syphilis, hepatitis. I wonder if I've missed any out. So we can get all of these things still, even with barrier methods. So if our partner then says, I want to go away and sleep with somebody else and be fluid bonded, the three of us, you need to really have a serious conversation as is that okay by you? Because you're one of your partners, or, you know, people who are solo poly, or, you know, have different partners all the time, they still bring more risk the more people we sleep with, because we're just open to more things, because it's more human beings rather than just one-on-one. It's not that one is right, it's not that one is wrong. It's just that there is more risk because there are more people. However, if there are two people and one is really untrustworthy and does what the fuck they want, that's way more dangerous than these 6 people who really care for each other and care about the morals and the principles of their fluid bonding. If they're doing that, they're much safer than this one person who says, I don't give a shit. And what we've got, as was just said earlier, because we do see a lot of people who do that. Who said it earlier? So somebody just said, you know, I got some cinders, I got a fair few DMs, you know, like, I just need a sub, I just need somebody to do this and that too, and I'm not going to tell the missus, I'm not going to tell the mister, I'm not going to tell the them, you know. And that's a serious problem, isn't it? Because people are lying still. So I would argue you need to work out, what does fluid bonding even mean to you, and why are we so obsessed with fluids? Yes, they increase chances, but you can still get all of these things. The only thing you won't get is pregnant. Now, do I think that's a serious issue nowadays, especially in certain states in America? Yeah, I fucking do. I really do. It's become a very different issue, hasn't it? And it's also a very moral issue for a lot of people as to what the options are when somebody falls pregnant. A really moral issue about the rights and wrongs, anti, pro, abortion, life, all those words that we use that really, really get to people. We also get a lot of people saying, but I don't like the feel of a condom. I don't, and they are of all genders. So you've also got, listen, I love being coming. I love that feeling of somebody fucking me, coming inside my cunt, filling me up. I always say I'm an old-fashioned girl. I like it in my cunt. It doesn't mean I don't like anal. It means I love that feeling of being come inside and being claimed. Like, you're fucking mine. I can do what I want with you. I really love that feel in the moment. But I also love my wellness a lot more. Andy, could fluids taken from a partner's bits below on your fingers that had an STI and stay in a scene then, rubbed in nasal passages, mouth, etc., have some kind of serious effect around those facial areas? Define serious effect. Could it pass something on? The answer is yes, potentially it could. And however, all viruses, all bacteria also have a shelf life. So it depends which one you're talking about and what sort of shelf life. However, if you've got a damp patch, if someone's come on, let's say someone comes on your pillow, right? And then you sleep on it, you can get things like pink eye, you can get infections, and those things can also come in through mucous membrane, different areas that, was it Cinders was talking about as well, just earlier as well. Yes, it was Cinders. So yes, there are very much smaller risks. The risk goes down and down and down and down and down. However, the whole point that we talk about with half the things we discuss, like rack and prick, are all about awareness. So this is what we're talking about here. Don't take me so seriously. You go, right, I'm just going to live in this bubble and nobody can ever touch me again. That's not what I'm saying either, am I? I'm saying be risk aware. I mean, say being sores, outsores, blisters, etc. in those areas. Look, yes, blisters pop, blisters move. Have you seen the fluid that comes from a blister if you pop it? I remember having a cold sore and having a singing exam that day, a really serious singing exam. I'm not kidding when I say I took a razor blade and I sliced that motherfucker open and it just ran down my chin. I'm sure that's really lovely. About 3 people are probably leaving because of me saying that one statement now. Absolutely horrific. And blisters pop and move, especially with pressure, and sex and touch is pressure on a blister or on something else as well. So of course, but also people fall into that really strange, I'm just watching a spider thinking, don't land on my face. And people get really frightened about things like, oh no, but you know, there are blisters and things that are different. No, it could just be dry. That area might not have anything on it at all. As I said, when you look at things like HPV, the virus lives in the skin in that area for up to 2 years, but you have no sign of anything. Again, changes. And of course, if you've had warts very high up inside you, no one can see them. Nobody knows. We don't know. So you really have to ask questions here of yourself. What does it mean? What does it mean about I'm asking partners about this? What does it mean to all these partners? Do you have a kitchen table meeting about this? Do you have kitchen table polyamory where you all sit down and discuss these things? Do you have to put forward a case where somebody is more at risk if they're immunocompromised or they're more worried, or maybe they have like a health anxiety or they're very stressed about these sorts of things? What am I actually worried about here? Is it about feelings? Is it about things? So is this really about somebody controlling, or is this about somebody being open? There's nothing wrong. If we violate agreements, what does that mean? How are we going to do that? This is about safe practice. This is about caring practice. This is about a relationship with another human being. And people try and say, yeah, but if I'm sleeping with 4 or 5 people and it's really casual and I'm kind of solo poly, but I don't really want to get involved with anybody, it's just much more about sex. Yeah, but then why do you want to also ask to be fluid bonded with that person? Because it's a care. I know what you mean. Andy says, I had a virus attack a nerve in my shoulder and the specialist said it could have incubated there for many years beforehand. Yeah, there are so many interesting collected type viruses that can do that. Shingles, for example, that live at the bottom of nerve endings in certain areas for absolutely years before they decide to pop out again. So we just, again, it's about being careful, isn't it? What does it mean? I don't think you can turn around and say to anybody as a partner, you have to do this with me or this will happen. You will do this with me or this will happen. And this has got to happen. You can state that this is what I want. You can state that this is what I would prefer. But as soon as you've got a should in there, you should, you must, you ought, you've got to, nobody has to do anything. You have to think about what you want to do. And I'm going to come on to that a little bit later when we talk about that relationship and social anxiety. When somebody turns around and says to you, well, to be my partner, you've got to do this and you've got to do that. Look, the risk of a group of people having an STI is always going to be there. So if somebody does get an STI, rather than everybody fucking freaking out, what we all need to do is just all go and get tested and make sure we're okay. That's what we need to do. So what we need is a plan should something go wrong. We need a plan to sort out what this looks like. Is anyone here polyamorous and have like a really good set of systems with their partners? Is anyone here fluid bonded? Is anyone here have these sort of conversations on a regular basis? It could be that you are fluid bonded with 2 or 3 people in your group and not with 2 or 3 because of the way they are the way they are. It's not a judgment. It's not saying, oh, they sleep with more people. They might sleep with less, but they might never want to use condoms, but they do with you or something along those lines. What are the deal breakers for you? What does it say to you? What are your shoulds and musts for you, not for everybody else? What matters? And is fluid bonding hierarchical? And I think that's a really important question, especially in polyamory. Is it really about safety? And I think that's a question that really doesn't get asked a lot on the scene and in polyamory as well. What does it mean? Because if we're saying, no, only these 2 can be fluid bonded, and they're, let's say, I mean, we go back to couples privilege, really, especially if we then start talking about other people. My youngest daughter was speaking to a couple over the last couple of months. They kind of said to her that even though she sees who she wants to, I would argue that my youngest daughter is kind of solo poly, really, at the moment. More sexual than anything, kind of doesn't want to catch feelings. She definitely thinks feelings should fuck off. At the moment, that's where she is, and she's just got a new job, and that's what she plays with a few people and she sees a few people because she's also into BDSM. And the couple she was speaking to said to her, so we would want a fluid bond with you eventually after a few months. What you really mean is you want to come inside or do these different things because one of you doesn't like to wear a condom. That's really what they're saying. But then we don't want you to sleep with anybody else at all. That's very privileged, isn't it? When they go back together, they have their lives together and she's just what meets them once a week or every other week. You have to decide if that's a privilege for somebody else or whether it's okay for you or not. You need to decide. And she was like, well, I'm not going to do that. That's not all right. I don't agree with that. I also do not think it's okay to turn around and agree that you're having barriered sex with somebody else. And then the morning after to turn and say to somebody, shit, by the way, I know we slept together last night, but I had unprotected sex or I fluid bonded with somebody. Too late. These discussions need to happen before. It's all about respect. Does anyone else think anything of any of those things? What do you think? What are your thoughts on all of that? And where do you go with that? And do we talk about fluid bonding in different holes, in different ways? There's more risk in anal sex than there is in vaginal sex. There's more risk in vaginal sex than there is in oral. So like the risks go down with different holes. So do we say you can fluid bond with somebody orally, but you can't fluid bond with somebody anally, but you can vaginally, depending on who we're sleeping with? So of course, those things are quite gender-based. That's an interesting question, isn't it? Do people in these situations have someone to go through a quarantine period before they fluid bond in a poly family? Yes, they do. Sorry if the question sounds naive, just don't know much about these arrangements. Yes. So do you remember I said we might agree a time where we say, okay, we're all sleeping together. This is what we're doing. You're sleeping with so this person's just come in. Maybe these people are fluid bonding. This person comes in and we agree that we will not fluid bond with this person for the first couple of months, that we use some form of barrier protection method. And then we say, hey, this is really, we're getting on brilliantly. We speak to our polycule or different people that we're with and say, I would like to ask this person to fluid bond with me. And that's really what we should do. There you go. And that's the classic. So then we say, right, now we're going to do a set of tests. And when everybody has their test results back, that's when we act. So we do no sex until full STI testing done. Cinders, that's true, Deb. I listened to the 28-ish days podcast. I haven't heard that. On BBC Radio 4 recently. It's on catch up too, and quite amazing to hear how defensive the vagina and uterus are. I mean, I think our bodies are incredible things. I really do. So I think we have to be very appreciative and careful of them. So we have to understand that anal sex is the most dangerous, vaginal sex is the next one down, and oral sex is the next one down. Here's the link. Oh, thank you very much. I'll try and have a look later or a listen later. I really appreciate that. It's always good to listen. I haven't heard that one, so it's always good to listen to something new. So I appreciate that. Thank you. So I think if you're going to fluid bond or you want to fluid bond with somebody, number one, you have to decide what fluid bonding is. Number two, you have to ask yourself, why am I so interested in fluid bonding? Am I using fluid bonding as well, that's the only way to be safe? Because if you are, you're talking out of your ass. It is not, it's about so much more. It's about so much more because we can catch all sorts of things without barrier, even using barrier methods, because we can't barrier the whole of our body, and skin and viruses live in different places at different times. What does fluid bonding mean? So we've got to be really careful about that one. So do we mean mouths? Do we mean arses? Do we mean vaginas? Do we mean penises? Do we mean gloves? What do we mean? Because if you've got really long nails and you decide to fist someone, there is probably going to be some form of blood. If you punch someone hard enough and you're inside against their cervix, there will be fluids and blood. When we create swelling or scratching or hurt somebody in any way, shape or form, we create issues with fluids. So is that fluid bonding? You can argue that it is, because at the moment, I don't have nails. My nails are really short, but because I haven't had my nails done in quite a while. But what's interesting for me is I'm kind of scratching at my fingers and there's quite a lot of blood around I'm kind of biting and pinching a little bit, which I never normally do when I've got long nails. So I'm like, stop that, Deb, that's really bad. What's interesting is that blood, if my fist or hand is inside somebody else in any way, shape or form, or even in their mouth, this sort of stuff, simply done, isn't it? Touch somebody's mouth as well. Fuck me, the mouth bleeds, people. The mouth really bleeds. So again, be careful. because all of these things are fluids. So what does fluid bonding mean to you? Why have you got a thing about fluid bonding? What does it even mean? Superorganism, yes, that's one I do know. So when we talk about this, it's just understanding, what do we mean by fluids? Why are we so hung up on fluid bonding when actually we can catch a lot of things? Is it emotional? Is it about hierarchy? And or is it about safety? And or is it about things along the lines of, should I be really careful, for example, about somebody that we're with in some way, shape or form, because they might be more vulnerable, more open, immunocompromised, or something in some way, shape or form. So somebody's just written to me, my current situation is 2 partners, fluid bonded. Man has a new partner, no sex yet, and also wants to fluid bond with them. So no direct contact with me, but I am immunocompromised. The problem is, although there's no direct contact, there is contact, because if someone's having sex with someone who has sex with someone, it is contact. It's not direct contact, but it is contact. If the person you are having sex with is having sex with somebody else and somebody else, or they're having sex with this person who's now having sex with that person, we're all having sex together, whether we like it or not. We're all involved in fluid orgies, as I put it. You're not sleeping with them directly. We're all involved in a fluid orgy, because fluids pass, fluids stay. Listen, I'm a cut queen. One of the things I love, I probably shouldn't say this out loud, especially not in this sort of situation. One of the things I love is, all with consent and everything else as well, that the person I love fucks someone else, comes inside them. I love their cock being covered, creamed and covered with their fluids, and they come home and they say, fucking suck this, or take this, you fucking worthless cunt. And then they screw me. I love that sort of shit. But the danger that goes along with that is way higher. And the dangers aren't just about bacteria and viruses, they're about upsetting my natural flora too. So all of those things come with risk. Be aware of your risk, understand your risk. That's the point here, isn't it, about fluid and fluid bonding? So yeah, anyone got any questions that they want to type or ask about fluid bonding before we go on to anything else? Cinders, agreed with Debs here. I've had to shield myself from COVID-19 for the past few years because I cannot risk being in contact with someone else who doesn't have to address the same risks as me. And it is something to think about, isn't it? Listen, I'm a fat old woman. I'm 57 years old and I'm a size 18 in the UK, which is, I think, is that US 14? That's what I am. In theory, COVID should have been really dodgy for me. It wasn't. I breezed through it. It wasn't so much of a problem. That's not true. I did have an ambulance out at one point. My sats hit 82, so that wasn't fantastic, but I had a little bit of inhaler and I was fine. Didn't end up in hospital. I wasn't in a bad way. I know really fit people. So it's really interesting what impacts our immune system are things that we don't even know about. And when we look back one day, when we look at COVID, what we'll be looking at, which is the way all medicine will go eventually, is genetic. It will be all about our own personal makeup and structure as to how something is attacked or isn't. It won't be about generalized drugs. And there will be a lot of genetic factors that come into COVID and how it hit people and why it hit people the way it did, whether that's about ethnicity, whether that's about size, whether that's about gender, it doesn't matter. It's about all of those things. Andy says at Cinders, and it's still about in a strong way. I know quite a few people who've picked it up very recently. Yeah, I know a lot of people are getting it for the 2nd and 3rd time as well. Last week, I didn't feel well. I had my 4th COVID jab and a flu jab in the same arm and ended up with a quite high temperature, but I think that was the flu jab. But yes, it is around. Of course, it's still there. Of course, it makes a difference. So we have to be aware of that. So please be aware. What do you mean by fluid bonding? What does it mean to you? Why are we talking about fluid bonding in this particular scenario? Is it about your feelings? Is it about your risk? What is it about? So you need to have those conversations way before you have the conversations about whether you're going to fluid bond or not. Does that make sense? So it takes conversation. And listen, when a lot of us are about to have an orgasm or about to kiss for the first time or about to touch for the first time, we very rarely give a fuck about safety. As soon as all of our turn on comes into our lives, we don't give a flying fuck. We're just interested in the moment. So these conversations need to happen a little bit beforehand, and they can be a bit dry, they can be a bit boring. And that's quite dangerous as well for a lot of us. Okay, so if anyone doesn't have a question, Cinders, it is, the winter is supposed to be awful too, so I'm still having to be very careful. For definite, people are. So right, the next questions, I have 3 more questions that were asked, so let me try and go through these as well. I've just written them down. So this next person said to me, they gave me some very personal details that I'm not willing to share here because it's not my business to spit in facts. I love this. Well, I'm quite graphic the way I speak and very direct, I think. So sorry if it's too much for people. No, I'm not. That's a load of bollocks. If you don't like the way I talk, you don't have to come to my workshops, do you? You don't have to listen to them. It's very much a personal choice. It's also the way I therapize as well. I'm very direct. I really believe in people learning and learning the facts and understanding so they can make different decisions. The next person, Tarana, gave me a lot of personal details. I don't want to go into their personal details because I don't want any form of identification for them, or that they feel that they can be identified. So they gave me, but they told me that they were in their 30s, and what they said was that they're not very good at dating. That was their words. I'm not good at dating. Why? What their worry is that they betray their own personal values, that they end up being with somebody, but they compromise their own needs. They're way too eager. They're in too fast. They're gushy, simping. These are their words. And they put people on pedestals. And so what they've eventually done with that is they've now brought in that belief that people won't like me unless I am that way, or won't like me back if I like them. So what this person is asking is, how do I emotionally regulate my behaviors when I'm feeling really anxious about what I'm feeling, when I am in a relationship with somebody else and I'm really scared? And listen, somebody I know had a lovely picture up the other day. It was a very simple picture. A hungry heart will always eat lies. That is such a fucking awesome phrase, isn't it? A hungry heart will always eat lies. The problem lies with us in that situation. So relationships can be really thrilling, can't they? They're an absolute source of joy, love, passion, everything else as well. Whether they're poly, whether they're kinky, love is really intoxicating and exciting. However, for a lot of people, it's fucking anxiety inducing, and it's stressful and it's worrying. We get really anxious, we get really scared, and we put ourselves in situations where we say, if I'm not that type of person, will they like me? What do I have to do about this? And I'm going to put myself to the back. One of the things I really think about in those situations for me personally is, I like the 5 5s. So the 5 5s as a system is, so if I think about this in 5 hours, if I think about this in 5 days, 5 weeks, 5 months, and 5 years, and I have to think a little bit of ahead when I use that system. So somebody might say to me, oh, I really love you. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. Or I really want you to do this. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'm going to give up on all my own personal boundaries for that person. But are they going to be around in 5 hours? Are they going to be around in 5 days? Are they going to be around in 5 weeks? Are they going to be around in 5 months, 5 years? I really need to think about that, because I'm about to make a decision that somebody else is helping me with. Are they helping me though? Or do they want what they want from me? So it's really difficult. And one of the ways I do it as well, so this is another thing. So I've just picked up my phone. This is one I've told you before. So if you've ever seen me, you've seen this before. So this is all about, for me, God, if there are any pedophiles in here, they're about to have a great time. Can you see that? This to me is all about this little girl here, right? That little girl is me. If I wouldn't put her in that situation, if I wouldn't risk her in that situation, why am I risking myself? Because I am her. If you have a picture of yourself when you're younger, if you wouldn't do those things, I think we really have to think about this. And what we tend to do is we dictate and plan a future. And what's interesting is a lot of us dictate and plan a future very negatively. We are hardwired to see things in a very negative way. We can also be hardwired to be glorified as well. So we can get into this glory situation where we say, oh, okay, will this work out? Will they like me? Will we be okay? If I'm a really good girl or a good boy, they will like me. If I'm a good kitten, if I'm a good human, they might like me. So I'm going to try and be the best person they definitely want me to be. Do I like them? Oh my God, let's go fast. I know, let's book a holiday. If we book a holiday for next month, then they're definitely not going to leave me for the month, are they? And we're getting quicker. We need to slow down. We need to stay in the moment and find out what's going on here. But that's way easier said than done for a lot of us. I think it's really good to talk to other people. I think it's really good to be aware if we have some kind of anxiety and what it does to us. And it creates a distance between us and the other person. It creates a distance between us and our friendships, and it creates a distance between us and ourselves. And we don't feel good about it, because relationship anxiety is terrifying. We either grip on too hard and make the other person run, or we run away ourselves. And neither of those are particularly positive. And if we are compromising our values and goals, then we have a serious problem. Somebody who loves you doesn't want you to compromise your values and goals. They want you to be well. They want you to be healthy. They would be happy to go a little bit slower. But sometimes we don't even give that other person a chance because we're so busy dictating in our heads. Have you had that conversation out loud is another thing I always ask. Have you actually said it to them? I was dealing with a couple today. By the way, if I talk about any of my clients, I have full express permission to talk about my clients. So let's just make that clear, because some people say, I don't want to come to you because you talk about me. Well, if you come to me and you say, Deb, don't talk about me, I just won't talk about you. That's not difficult. That's really quite simple. But this couple are arguing about, you don't ever fucking do anything. I have to earn money. You don't fucking bring enough in. You haven't worked since June. I don't believe in mental health issues. You've got to stop drinking. You've got fucking hell. What they need to do, this couple, let alone amongst everything else, is they haven't even ever done an honest budget together. They've never sat down and really spoken about the things out loud that they need to speak about. Oh, the number of times I've asked someone, have you told them X, Y, Z? And they say no, as if the other person is a mind reader. Scott says, Deb, can I add to what you're saying? Feel free to type, Scott. You are absolutely welcome to type. So type away. So it's very important that we find out what's right and what's wrong here and how that works. What does that mean for us? Really important. So how do we do that? That's interesting. I can't see Scott on the board. Strange. Oh, yes, I can. There. Hello. Feel free to type. I can see you now. Type away and I will definitely read it out. We get really anxious. Now, we can be anxious because of our mental health. We can be anxious because we might have something like borderline, which is now called EUPD. We might be anxious because all of our relationships have failed. Define failure. We might be anxious about relationships because we just are so desperate. That hungry heart will take up any lie, and the lies that we tell ourselves. We can be really frightened of intimacy. We can be really frightened of getting hurt. So we do a lot of things, and we say some awful things to ourselves that say this is the way that it is. And we've got to be really careful about that, because we get in our own way. I need to get out fast. I need to change things. What we do know is, if you say it out loud, often it can help. One of the ways I love to share, so Brené Brown talks about the story, I talk about the paranoid fantasy. Hey, I've got a paranoid fantasy. It's going around in my head, and I know it's me and I know it's my head. Can I share it with you without criticism? I just need to say, yeah, of course you can. I'd really be interested. Oh God, I'm really sorry you believe that. Not, you're a fucking weirdo. I can't believe you believe that. God, I'm really sorry that that's the way you think. I can tell you now that's not the way I'm thinking. Sometimes when I'm dealing with clients, they're so frightened about what I'm going to say or what I think of them, which has nothing to do with me. It's projection about everybody else. It's projection. Scott says, sure, all emotions are tied to three things: feeling, thoughts, and physical response. It does not matter whether it is jealousy, compassion, happiness, fear of missing out. If we can manage the thoughts, we can manage the feelings and physical response. I'm going to twist that one a little bit more, Scott. Actually, physiologically, our emotions are the first things that happen. If we use CBT, we can control some of our thoughts. However, if we turn a human being into a house, if you think about the house and we have the soft furnishings, what happens is that the curtains, the little bits and pieces that we can change are like our thought patterns. We need to challenge our thoughts. We need to say, is that true? So I said to a client today, she said, well, you know, it's always like that. And I said, is it? Is it always? Well, no, but you know, no, I don't. Is it always? And then when we dissect that a little bit, we start to actually realize that that isn't a true thought. So that's very CBT based when we're looking at rumination, when we're looking at thought processes and the way that our thoughts get interfered with there. So that's really important. So we do that. That really matters. But the thoughts are like the soft furnishings, as I said. We then have, maybe we need a bit more space, or we've got some damp, and we need to have a look. Thousands of cognitive distortions. I mean, it's endless what we do, endless. We then might need a bit more space in our house. So now we're going to start to look at behavior. So there might be a bit of damps, or there might be a crack in the wall. So we change the wall, we fill it, or we chip out that bit and we need to put something else in, or we put an extension in. And we're starting to look at our behavior now to say, this is interesting. What's happening here? However, if the soft furnishings haven't worked to change, and actually your house still has some cracks in and the damp isn't going in and the space isn't enough, we've got to look at our foundations. Human beings are born feeling. They're not born thinking. The thinking, cognition, comes later. If you look at the base of anything, it's like being shot with an arrow. It's an ow. It's a fear. It's a physiological response. It's a feeling, which leads to, so an emotion leads to feelings, behaviors, and thoughts. However, it's an emotion, it's its base. When a lot of people come to see me, they often, the sort of people I see as a therapist are people who've had quite a lot of therapy, who say, I don't fucking know what to do, help me. And I always say that when we come into therapy, this is the problem. And what happens is, this is the problem that we present, whether that's anorexia, depression, everything else as well that we have. This breaks off because it's not working anymore. The person comes into therapy and wants this fixed. So we fix it. This is still a problem. And this is about the foundations. It's about ow, isn't it? When we're angry and we want to say, fuck off, you cunt, we're angry because we're scared, probably. Or we're angry because we're overwhelmed by something. That's a fucking emotion, isn't it? That changes things. That's different. The thought process won't necessarily help us. It won't necessarily make a big difference. We have to challenge those thoughts, and we can challenge those thoughts, and that might work for 6 months. That might work for a year. Self-control, what does that mean? If I turn around and say to someone with serious depression, fucking sort yourself out, sort out, get up out of bed, get some self-control, won't work. If I say to an anorexic, no matter how much I teach them around eating, around nutrition, around what anorexia or lack of carbohydrates and other things do to the brain, what insulin does in the body, it doesn't matter how much I teach them about any of that. They've got to fucking want it. They've got to feel it. That's when it makes a difference. It will hurt more than saying, I see you using words of affirmation to get them on the right path. It will hurt more than saying, I'm not quite sure what you mean there, Scott, but it will hurt more than saying. We have to really understand that we have to get to the feelings about what's going on, not so much about, it's not just about the thoughts. But I work with CBT. I also work with DBT, which is dialectical behavioral therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy. But the most change I see in, I think what have I got? I don't know, 50, 60,000 hours now of working. The most change I see is when their feelings are, someone's feelings are changed. And when we meet somebody else in a relationship, it's our fear that's changing stuff. It's our shit that hits us. It's what we're fucking terrified of. And mainly it's the sort of stuff we say to ourselves. Learning the difference between feelings and non-feelings has been helpful for me. I really agree with that. And also understanding our physiological response, because sometimes our physiological response is to do with our sympathetic nervous system that puts us into fight, flight, freeze, friend, fuck, block, bow, fawn, all those F's. And actually, our thoughts might get us out of it and help us for a while. But if you want to be even more effective, what we've got to look at is, gosh, that's a really old physiological response. What's that about? Where did it come from? Why? How do I change my physiological response? And should I? What is the difference between feelings and non-feelings? Well, different people do them in different ways. So, because some of them are, we tell ourselves how things are. Sometimes an actual physical feeling. What is a feeling? What is an emotion? So you can look at emotions wheels and they can help you decide and define what emotions are actually yours. An emotions wheel is a really good thing to have. A physiological response is could be a real emotion, but it can also be an overlayer. I don't know if this came up already, but a related resource that changed my life is Excuse Me, Your Life is Waiting by Lynn Grabhorn. Not one I've read actually, Lucy, at all. So I don't know about that one. I haven't seen it. I think there are thousands of great books out there that can really help you. The stuff I've learned in my own therapy, the stuff I've learned by even therapizing others and doing different things. Oh, Cosmopolite's put things up. So non-feelings are words that describe what we think others are doing to us. And so blame. Okay, so let me just go into this a little bit more. So when we say to somebody, you're being really horrible to me, that is our perception of what is happening. That is our idea of what is happening, and we're judging them by something that's maybe gone on in the past. So that might not be an authentic feeling. So for me, non-feelings and feelings are about authenticity and non-authenticity. So different therapists will have different words for different things, and different people will have different words for different things. This is for when we're on the drama triangle and we're attacking, we're persecuting another person. When we have an argument, especially with a child, isn't it interesting that we're having an argument with this child and we basically say, can you tidy your room? And then by the end of the argument, for some reason, we're mentioning child line, legality, and child cruelty. Have you ever noticed that? When you're in an argument with someone, you start with something, you end up with something completely different. And that's because they chuck in all these judgment words. That's because they chuck in all of this stuff in the beginning, churn you up, you go along, and you're here. And then I would also argue that we can feel a certain way, and it doesn't necessarily dictate that that is actually a feeling. It might be a learned response because of what's happened in the past to us. So we put that on somebody. An example, feelings were, oh, thank you, that's very kind of you. So you are doing something to me when we say that. So like if we take up like a word like you've let me down, according to who? You are abusing me. Are they? Or do you feel abused? And actually, do you feel abused, or do you feel discombobulated? Are you scared? Because that will be the real feeling. Your basic core feelings are happy, angry, scared, disgust, contempt, surprise. What have I said? So angry, happy, scared, sad, contempt, disgust, surprise. 7 core feelings that we have as human beings. The rest are outer responses, like jealousy. I feel, you fucking do this to me, you make me do this. It's really hard to sit with somebody and teach them that that is their response to something, and it ain't necessarily a fact. And one of the things that helps me sometimes is to say to myself, is that true? And my immediate answer will be, yeah, it's fucking true. It is, it's fucking true. And that's interesting, because what we've got there is your subjective response. So it's a subjective response. Yeah, it's true. Hang on though, objectively, is it true? Can you prove that to me in a court of law? Or can you prove it to me in a biology lab? No. But it's valid because it's my feeling. And now we're into something which we see a lot nowadays. Yeah, it's my feeling. My feelings are valid. Your feelings are valid, but are they right? Are your feelings actually your feelings, or are they interpretations? Are they used as barbs to hurt somebody else? And that's where it becomes really interesting, especially when we're trying to work out, how do I take this risk with somebody? Because we're very quick to blame somebody else and have a go, rather than say, what could I change here? What do I want out of this? Where is my power? And our own critical inner voice is also worse than most other people's. We very rarely have to say something horrible to somebody. They're thinking about themselves already, even if they're acting out and they're being pretty horrible. One of the things I believe as well is that a lot of us have a real crystal ball. So rumination, if you want to talk about CBT or thoughts, we have great predictors, don't we? We predict. Anyone here worried about money at the moment in any way, shape or form? Anyone here got a massive, like, people are really worried about money, right? Money is scary at the moment. So it's very interesting when we predict a negative future, or we think that somebody's doing something awful to us. Isn't it amazing how we can predict the future when it's negative? Have you noticed that? They won't like me. This won't work. That person's horrible. Well, you know what it's like. So I use something that I've made up for myself called the lottery. So what I tend to do for myself when I'm having a really negative thought like that, and I'm saying, oh, so I'm letting myself go here, I really must challenge all my barriers and behaviors, otherwise they won't like me. So actually, let's go back to barriered sex. Fuck it, I'm going to let them come inside me, even though I don't think that's safe, because they won't like me if I don't let them come inside me. That's a really good example, right? A really good example. What I'm doing is risking myself in that moment, everything else as well. But what I need to be aware of, and I say to myself, Deb, lottery, what do I mean by that? Right. I am predicting the future. If you're that good at predicting the future, what I want you to do, all of you, is to take all of your money right now, and I want you to spend every single penny that you have on the lottery for tomorrow night. Every single penny. Would you do with it? Would you do that? Would you take every single penny you have? Cinders, if you've got your last fiver or your last 20 quid, or your last 1,000. And like Karis, I'm really sorry to hear that, because it is fucking horrific. Yeah, we are catastrophizing, aren't we? They won't like me, this won't happen. So the reason I say lottery to myself is, if I'm going to take every single penny I've got and put it on the lottery over what's left in my overdraft to spend on the lottery, would I do that? Would you do that? If I said to you, if you've got 20 quid left, or if you've got 2,000, you've got 20,000, and I said, fine, then you can predict the future, go and spend it on the lottery, would you do it? Would any of you just go and do it? Why not? Why wouldn't you do it? I mean, you could lose a lot of money. You could lose everything you've got, because it's a gamble. No, it's not a gamble. You can predict the future. It's not a gamble. You've just told me you know exactly what's going to happen. So take all of your money and put it on the lottery. Why won't you? Because you can't fucking predict the future. And I find that's really handy for me sometimes, because when it comes to something that really matters, like, you know, my whole well-being in life, I'm not going to take that risk. Let me get my crystal ball. I know, I just need to, I'm just going to put, here we go. I've got my hair scraped back today. I'm already there. So, you know, crystal ball. It's really interesting, isn't it? I can't predict the future when it's too great a risk, but when it confirms something about myself or somebody else that I think I have to do, I then can. It's funny that. It's really bad for us. We need to learn emotional regulation. And you know what? Most people nowadays are not practicing or learning emotional regulation. So this goes back to the same question. So what does emotional regulation mean? It means our capacity and our ability to soothe ourselves when we feel overwhelmed by an emotion. If you look at emotion, you're going to look at something called the emotional wave. So we've got an axis along here and along here. Here comes our emotion. This is just like giving birth. So, you know, it's going quite smoothly, it's going quite well, and all of a sudden it's just building up, and we're like, I can't fucking deal with this, I can't do it, I can't do it, I can't do it, oh fuck, shit, piss, bollocks, fuck, shit, cunt, oh actually no, it's okay, it's going now, I think I can. That last 20 minutes, that little bit on the top, is like transition in birth. And when somebody's transitioning in birth, that's the point where they turn around and say things along the lines of, you're never fucking touching me again, put your hand inside me and it's not coming out, I fucking hate all of you, give me the drugs, and we're biting somebody, right? That's that moment. Not all people are like that when they give birth. Can I point that out? I'm being a bit dramatic here, I know I am. And it's that point where somebody is ready to kill somebody else. I can't do it, I can't do it. And I was like, okay, yes, I can. I'm giving, okay, I can. It's that 20 minutes. Emotions are like this as well. We reach that 20 minutes, that last bit, and we say, I can't fucking do this, and we cut it off. So when we cut it off, children cut it off as well. And children are taught to cut it off. Don't cry, darling, have a toffee apple. Don't worry, darling, have a new toy car. Don't be ridiculous, let's sit you in front of the television. You are not teaching a child to emotionally regulate when you don't let them go through an emotion. And loads of kids are not taught how to emotionally regulate anymore, because they are fed, watered, given something, bought, and have all these different things that come into it, rather than having to deal with their own emotion, because we can't bear to watch them suffer. Then what we've got is a load of people who are saying, I'm entitled to my fucking emotions, I'm fine. You are entitled to be angry, you're not entitled to be aggressive. They're two really different things. The emotion is anger. Aggression is an action. And it's one that ain't welcome in my vicinity, my family, you can be angry. I really respect your anger. Feel it, it's important. Aggression isn't welcome. So there's the doing of an emotion and the feeling of an emotion, and they're very different things. And we really have to think about that as well. So that's important. We need to learn to breathe, to know that it'll pass, to know that we will live, to know that we'll be okay. And the more we don't, that 20 minutes then becomes 25, 30, 40, 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, and we can't do it. Cosmopolite, I train dogs for a living, and I see people do the same thing with dogs that have behavioral issues. They are so quick to try to shut down the emotion rather than allow them to process and try to co-regulate. I really agree. We're immediately in with a smack or a treat. It's the same with a child. It's the same with us. Do you want a smack or a treat? And if you think about BDSM, that fits really well, doesn't it? I can't handle my emotions. Please give me a beating. I mean, that can be great, but maybe you need a beating in 20 minutes, not right now. I have avoided my dad lately as he cannot control his anger and he lashes out at everyone around him. I can understand the psychology behind his actions, but I refuse to tolerate his behavior. And that's so important, Cinders, that difference between your emotions, I will respect, your action, your behavior, I will not. We have a choice. No matter how bad things are, we have a choice about how we respond. We always have a choice, no matter how desperate, there is an element of choice. You know what, Debs, that statement is similar to when you're out mountain biking. You get near an obstacle, think you can't do it, then you get over the obstacle, realize you aren't dead, and then the next time you see that obstacle, it's a walk in the park. It's the same as the runner's wall. It's the same with any of these things. It's the same. You could be tying someone up and all of a sudden you think, oh my God, I don't know what to do next. So yeah, you do. You need to take a breath. You do. It's all about trusting ourselves. But if you haven't been taught about emotional regulation, it's really hard to trust ourselves. So 40 regulation strategies lead to social anxiety, relationship anxiety, and everything else as well. So we need to look at emotionally regulating ourselves and working out how we can do that. That's not easily done. But what we need to do is learn how we are, what that means. So we have to look at our thought pattern. We have to know what our feelings are underneath that. So we need to understand. Half the key in most of these things, and no one will like me for this, is exposure. When we are anxious, we need to expose. When we are worried about situations where we might fawn, we actually need to expose. Then someone says to me, no, I can't do that. That's traumatic. I've got a trauma. I can't expose. But then we're prolonging all the pain and agony. This is like putting a child, when you help a child to sleep, and they can't sleep and you're like, oh, do you know what, I can't fucking deal with this, I'm just going to go in. So we're going in for the next 4 years potentially with some children, or a dog. My dogs are barking, I placate, I stop them barking, I'm now going to have to placate and stop them barking for the next 4 or 5 years, or I can live through a little bit of hell for a few weeks and actually have a much better system. And it's much better for me. So we have to identify a problem. We have to understand it. We have to understand the physiological responses that we have. And we have to understand what that physiological response needs. So fight, flight, freeze, friend, fuck, flop, foe, fawn, they are all a mass of adrenaline, a mass of loads of hormones flooding your body in that moment that says, oh, I can't do this and I'm really panicking. We forget to breathe. Breathing out is the most important thing we can do here, just to go, breathe in for 4, breathe out for 7. It's a really simple method. It really helps calm. And you go, fucking breathing won't work, Deb. What the fuck are you talking about? It's a very proven method. Breathing is really effective. It also starts to bring in the vagal nerve and different aspects of our human physiological responses that are really important. One of the things that will really work, especially if you believe in vagal nerve type theories, is put your face in freezing fucking cold water. Not if you've got things like rosacea or different things that will really impact your skin. When I'm working at cheer competitions, when I've got a child having a panic attack, I make sure I've got permission for all these things. I've always got some ice water in my bag. I just tip it straight over their head or down their back. The physiological shock response takes them out completely and they're in a completely different place. Or I do some exercises with them or breathing. Clearly, this is all done with consent. You don't just go up to someone who's having a panic. Of course, you don't do that. So I'm doing that as a professional in a very different thing. So breathing is very important in impact play. I do a pain workshop where I teach people to breathe to get through pain. And I teach people who are topping to interrupt breathing patterns to create more pain. So you can play with it both ways. It's loads of fun. You can do it both ways. So if you get people to count and do weird things, they can't get on top of their breathing. So you can muck about with their pain with consent, obviously. However, if you want someone to be able to really breathe through the pain and take more, teaching them to breathe properly is really important. So your body's response is full of adrenaline. We also need to get rid of it, especially if it is adrenaline. 20 jumping jacks, moving on the spot, doing something really quickly can really help us. Our heart's racing and pounding. Our chest feels like it's breaking. We've got pins and needles in our fingers and toes, maybe. Our stomach's churning. Our mouth is dry. We feel like we need a pee. Anyone ever need a nervous pee? All of these things, we're just like, oh, we start sweating or we're a bit damp. We're like, oh, I'm not okay with this. We can feel dizzy, lightheaded. We can feel nauseous. We can blush or go bright red. All of those things are symptoms of some form of social anxiety or fear or worry about what someone's about to do. So you need to learn how to cope with those. I think I've well, yeah, I've got a writing on, fuck, they're having a panic attack. What do I do now? In that writing are 5 or 6 things to help you work through with somebody in some way, shape, or form so you can do it. We all find things that are difficult. Like Andy just said, when you're on that bike, you avoid something. And actually that something grows, it gets worse each and every time, especially if you were a kid and you first experienced it. So when you're a kid, you experience it and that wall is so tall. As an adult, it's only really that tall, but it feels even bigger. So we've got to be really careful. So we avoid social situations. We actually make it worse. We maybe won't answer the phone. We maybe won't talk to people. We won't do things, or we won't put ourselves in situations where we're at risk because we're really scared. We have some form of anxiety around that. So we then need to understand what that is, what that looks like, and the implication that it has on us. And then we need to work out tactics. We need to work out tools that will help us. Breathing, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method, 4-7 breathing, box breathing, square breathing, making sure you expose yourself to all of these things. So it's really difficult. And it's also the way we talk to ourselves. One thing that Scott was saying earlier was about, it's our thought process. If you say to yourself, I cannot, they will not, they are absolutes. And as soon as we're talking in absolutes, we're not talking in truths anymore. We're talking in theories. And that doesn't work for us as human beings. Oh, nobody likes me, it will never be okay. That's very absolute, isn't it? How do you know? Everybody likes somebody in some way, shape, or form. Things work. So if you're continuously stuck in that negative loop, it's not particularly helpful. And we've got to be really careful about that. So actually, we've developed ourselves becoming fearful of fear and fearful of situations. A lot of people who are frightened of flying aren't really frightened of flying or dropping or anything else as well. What they're frightened of is, I'm going to be frightened in a fucking metal box and I can't get out and I'm trapped. So I'm frightened of feeling the fear. And it's that we need to be able to deal with. And the sort of way we put ourselves in and say how it's going to be. So it strengthens that negative belief as we're going through it. When you get over that obstacle, Andy says, the next time you relish seeing it, yeah, it can be really exciting, can't it? It changes everything. So the problem is as well, that sort of anxiety is nearly always related to some kind of low self-esteem, low that we don't feel good about ourselves. If you really, as well, what we need to think about, especially for people in this situation, is that if you read anything by Bessel van der Kolk, I talk about him quite a lot because, I mean, he's one of the world's leading experts on trauma. Why wouldn't I talk about him? It's somebody I really respect. He has a paper on the compulsion to repeat trauma. He has so he talks about reenactment, revictimization, and masochism, which is interesting for us when it comes to kink as well in these situations. If we keep putting ourselves in situations where we hurt ourselves, that can be as a result of trauma. So actually, one of the things we need to do, and you ain't going to like what I'm about to say, is not put ourselves in those situations. They're the times when we need to not expose and not do that. So that might be where we need a little bit more clinical help, where we need to go and see somebody who knows a hell of a lot more about trauma. So if those fragmented memories, that issues that we have in our past that have built up, we need to really make sure that we're not putting ourselves in these situations again and again and again, because we are so compelled to reenact. And it goes back to that principle. I want something different to happen this time, but why would it? If we haven't worked on us and the things that happen to us, why would it be different this time? So those behavioral reenactments rarely help and rarely make a big difference. That repetition compulsion is, he talks about it quite a lot, and it's really interesting to read. It's really interesting to have a look at. So what do we need to do? It can cause harm to others. It can cause harm to ourselves. So I would also have a read of Bessel van der Kolk and have a look at why we want to do that. That makes a difference. And that takes me, let me just look at my notes quickly, because that goes to one of the other questions. And this links to what I've just said and to what this person asked as well. So, and I think I've covered some of this already, how to differentiate behaviors between people that are pleasing versus pleasing and fawning versus service-orientated submission. That's been answered a little bit already. And also, how do I look at, as a sub-solo person, as a masochist, how do I make sure that I'm not creating trauma bonds, or I'm reenacting, which is again what we were just getting onto as well, and how that works. So listen, if we're going to do something that harms us, it's going to harm us. I know it sounds ridiculous. Oh, thank you, Cinders. The body keeps the score. And also the last one was a paper. If you look at it, the re-victimization, reenactment and trauma, you can look it up. It's on Google, it's anywhere. It's not a copyrighted paper. It's completely available. So if we look at a way, so I've got a writing on FetLife if you want to look at it, and it's all about fawning, pleasing and submitting as a trauma response. Rather than me going into it for the next 3 hours, which is what it would take, please have a look at that article. I did not write it. It's nothing to do with me, but it talks about people pleasing as a trauma response. If we people please, we should get some, it's simple as this. This is one of the most simple answers. Once we've people pleased and once we've done something for somebody else, we should feel good about it. We should feel like we've achieved something. And we're like, I did that. I'm so glad I did that. I had such a good time and I really enjoyed myself. That was good. I submitted to that person. I pleased. I'm so glad I did that. That is what I would call a people pleaser's normal response. If you sit afterwards and say, oh, I can't believe I did that. I have some regrets. I'm really not sure if I should have done that. That's much more towards a trauma response. Could you please share the link to this article you mentioned is up on FET? What, my writing, the fawning one? Yep. Hang on, I'll have to find it. So give me a minute. So give me a couple of minutes. I'll find it and then I'll put it up while I'm talking as well. So we have to be really careful about, it's afterwards. Oh, thank you, Cinders. They're the papers. So let's look at these things that people are doing. I'll find the fawning one in it as well while we're talking. So I'll write as well. Let me put my glasses on for a minute, otherwise I won't manage it. So what we've got to be careful of is when we're doing some kind of trauma or fawning response, it often ends up hurting us and we end up having regrets. And that's when we know that it's more of a fawn response or a dangerous response rather than a response. Oh God, how do I get to everybody? There you go, everyone in meeting. I'm not very good at multitasking. Edit, paste. I think that's the writing. It should be, yeah. So if we people please and we fawn, it's a trauma response. So we're trying to reenact something. It connects there to Bessel's papers that you've got there. It reconnects us and tries to make us repeat something in order to feel better, but we won't feel better for having done it. If we do something, we go, I'm so glad I did that. I've had such a good experience. That was so sexy. That was so cool. That's a non-trauma response. So the difference between those is very, very simple. So it's often afterwards that we're going to feel that. So that's why I like the 5 5s. If I can imagine myself moving forward, will I have any regrets about this? So like, for example, I have a date on Saturday morning. I'm looking forward to that date. I'm getting on with that person. That's nice. I did sort of say at one point, he said, well, I could pop over to yours for a coffee. And I said, yeah, we could do that. You could just pop in. Great. When should we do that? We'll do that then at 6 o'clock. I then started to think a bit. And then I thought, I don't want that person in my home. I don't know them yet. And I might regret that. So I had the time and the capacity, because it is a capacity and it is having the spoons and the energy to really think about that. Do I want that? Is that what I want? Could that be a risk? Do I think this person is a risk? No. But how do I know? It's interesting. Andy says, I feel that's a trait of mine. I always feel I have to make sure everyone else is okay before I am, and it usually has a negative effect on me. It will always have a negative effect on you. Let's go back to the basics. Look, every person knows this, they've heard it. When you sit on a plane and your oxygen mask comes down, what do they tell you to do, Andy? Every time. So you've got an oxygen mask, it drops down and you're with a child. What do they tell you to do? Do you put the oxygen mask on the child first, or do you put the oxygen mask on you? So why? Why would you sort the child first? Actually, what they say is put the mask on yourself first, so then you put the mask on the child. You are not required to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. I like that, Felix. That's really good. My question is, at what cost? Andy, the right answer to that is actually you put the oxygen mask on yourself, because then you can breathe and you can help the child. If you help the child and you haven't quite got it on right and it's really disappearing and you're disappearing because it's very fast, because there's no oxygen in the air, You pass that, you can't save your child. You must save yourself first. Cinder says, interesting, this sort of trauma is mentioned in ancestral trauma too, especially in the ways that it trickles through the future generations. I have books on that too. Listen, they play all sorts of games with me, and one of them is bingo. I have a real obsession with epigenetic and transgenerational scripting. A lot of our trauma, a lot of our issues can be traced back potentially to traumas that happened to past generations 20, 30, 40 generations ago. Because we have something called epigenetic scripting or epigenetics, and we have all sorts of different influences, because not only do we have the epigenetics, we always have the environment of the next person trying to sort it out. If you think about parenting as a skill, what every parent tends to do is, well, I'm not going to parent like my parents did. I'm going to fucking do the opposite. Great, that's good for you. Is that good for your child? You're doing what you wanted, but then you're doing the same as your parents did to you. I've got a picture on FetLife, Andy, that's a puzzled person who has hundreds of bits of their puzzle missing. And this person has one puzzle piece missing, and they're holding out their hand saying, have another piece of my puzzle. We can't keep giving. We destroy ourselves if we give. And I do like that thing that Felix said, you're not required to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. Here you go, have another piece of me, have another piece of me, at what cost? And we can't keep doing that. And we know if we are traumatized, what we need to do is heal ourselves inside out. When somebody with very severe anorexia comes to me, let's say we get them eating, they're probably on 200 to 300 calories a day tops, if I'm lucky, especially if they're really bad. Now, if you look at all the clinics and all the advice, what we need to get them up to is probably anywhere between 3,000 to 6,000 calories a day. And I'm really serious. And every anorexic will say to me, fucking hell, I can't eat that much. You can, there are ways of doing it. But all sorts of interesting responses will then start to happen in the body internally. The insides heal before the outsides do. What that anorexic is so scared of is the weight gain. But actually what's going to happen first of all is they're healing on the inside. They're going to get thermogenic responses, heat responses that they haven't had in years. I've spoken about her before, one of my daughter's best friends who I took into hospital 2.5 years ago, nearly 3 years ago, because of how ill she was with anorexia. And do you know what? She spoke to me 2 weeks ago. She sent me a message. I see her. She's here every Wednesday for dinner. She eats whatever I put in front of her now. It's fucking amazing. No sickness, no issues. She's been in clinics for 3 years, near enough. She had a terrible time. And she said to me, she wrote to me, she went, oh, I'm having a hot flash. And I was like, oh, I'm not surprised. It's typical inside out healing. She's had the first period she's had in 10 years the other day. Oh my God, her insides are healing first. When we need that energy, it's our insides that need healing first. We need to increase one's own capacity to help others. We do. So if you want to help others, that's good. But if you're helping others because that's your response and that's a trauma response, you're not actually helping the other person, you're helping yourself. That's really interesting to think about. Actually, I remember that now about the mask, just shows how long it's been since I last went on a plane. Sorry, Andy. And so me too, I've traced back so many traumas in my grandparents and beyond. So couple that with all sorts of other issues, it's no wonder there are a lot of toxic behaviors now. I'm not very popular at the moment as I keep reminding my relatives of my boundaries, and I'm the first one to stop the traumas from going any further. It's not been well received. Do you know what? I have a real strong phrase that I love that somebody else's, it ain't mine. It's about the fact that you are not responsible for the hand of cards you are dealt in life. You're not, but you're fucking responsible for how you play them. That ain't fair. It's not fair. However, it is. And it's the only way around it. We can't make it better. We can't go back and change the past. Isn't trauma enactment also driven by our brains chasing dopamine? In a way, yes, it's not just dopamine, it's hormonal response. Because we're so used to the trauma, we're so used to that flooding, which isn't just about dopamine, it's also about norepinephrine and other hormones that flood into our body that we look for it. You know, when you go on a calorie deficit diet and you're told to eat something more than 1,900 to 2,000 calories, if you eat healthy, it's actually quite difficult to eat 2,000 calories. No, it's not. It depends on how you eat them and what you do. Plus, if you are told to go on that's not, a 19 to 200,000 calorie isn't a massive deficit. What I'm talking about is when people go on a VLCD, very low calorie diet, and they tend to have what people tend to do, what a lot of personal trainers and nutritionists will say is you need to eat 13 or 1400 calories. You never need to eat 13 or 1400 calories. If you really want to lose weight and effectively, you need to eat more than that. It's the type of food you eat, how you do it, how you work out, and how it's mixed with that. It's shocking what some people know and don't know. So, and it is really hard to hold a boundary. I always talk about families are like Fisher-Price family toy boxes, the shape sorters. When you, Cinders, change your shape from a crescent to a star, everybody has the hammer and they're trying really hard to knock you back into that shape to make you fit in the family, because families are also systemic. So when we have trauma, systems therapy is also really important, because you fit a certain shape and we want to reenact that to make sure it keeps going, because we would rather stay the shape we are because we know it. So our whole family takes hold of this fucking hammer and tries to move us into something else. And that's not healthy for us either. So to hold your shape, to grow, is really important, and that's really hard. So how do we know that we are trauma bonding or not trauma bonding? What does it mean and why? Oh God, yeah. Not just families, I mean, it's friends and people as well. It really varies. But so we have to really learn to look after ourselves when it comes to this. Oh, I absolutely agree, Debs. I cannot change what happened in the past or what I was subjected to, but I'm not willing to continue carrying the trauma for others. I've already felt so many benefits to myself physically and mentally. Gabor Mate and Peter Levine are also worth reading. They really are. So I would recommend any of those three. I would also turn around and say that Dan Siegel is another really good person as well. They're my 4 go-tos. There are a couple of others actually as well, but they would be my major go-tos. And actually, there's he's just got a new book out, hasn't he, as well? Oh, good old Gable. That's can't remember what the book's called off the top of my fucking head, but it's just come out recently, and that's also about trauma and how to deal with it. So anything written by any of them is really effective and really good. So to go back to my notes, service orientation will end up with us feeling, oh, Dan Siegel, fucking hell, he talks about how the brain works. You'll be there forever now. You'll be buying hundreds of books, which won't be very good for you at the moment. And that latest book it's just literally come out in the last 3 or 4 weeks, I think, as well, because I've just bought it. I just haven't read it yet. So if we are doing something because we're service orientated, we get pleasure from it and we feel that pleasure ongoing. If we turn around and we say that it comes from more of a fawning response, it never makes us feel better and it's never enough. And that's when we maybe need to go and see someone. Look, the only way to deal with trauma is to read a fucking shit ton about it. That can really help us. I get that lots of people can't afford therapy. If you really want to deal with trauma, you kind of have to go and see someone who's really experienced with trauma. And it doesn't always mean playing. It doesn't always mean having sex. It doesn't always mean exposing to relationship. I said before that exposure can be really helpful. In this scenario, it's not always helpful. It really isn't. It can be really dangerous to us. It can make a real difference. So the last question that person asked me was, if I'm a solo person and I want to have a look at a masochistic kink, how do I navigate that? And how do I make sure I'm not creating trauma bonding in some way, shape or form? Look, I think the problem is the word trauma bonding is terribly trendy, it's terribly out there, and it's one that we use. Why are we kinky? What are we trying to do in our kink? And what's going on there? I was asked to do a talk again the other day, and this person said, hi Debs, could you do a talk in a couple of Saturdays time? Would you mind? And this is somebody I really like. And could you do it on why BDSM is really good for trauma? And I said, I can do the talk, but it won't be that BDSM is really good for trauma. It'll be that it might be sometimes, and it can be really bad. That's what my talk will be about. It will not be, because then we're talking about what I was talking about before, Bessel van der Kolk and all those people. It's that reenactment of trauma, which is really bad for us. If we've had a terrible situation and we reenact all of these things, we want and hope for a better result. And we might get one in BDSM. We might get one in some way, shape or form. For a while, it might work. But as soon as someone does something slightly wrong, as soon as it doesn't go the way that our body needs it to go, our body will respond and react on a cellular level and feel a lot worse. I think self-help books can be really helpful and really brilliant. So since I love that you worked in a bookshop, it's amazing. And sometimes we need another brain to work that through with, because what we tend to do when we're reading, this is why therapy is even around. If we just do it for ourselves, we tend to read through our own filters, our own diagnostics, and sometimes we miss some things where somebody else says, hang on though. We go, oh shit, yeah, I didn't see that. It's another brain that can really help us sometimes, not always. Andy, why do we think if we're stressed, we could just do with a good tying up and a thrashing? Because we want those endorphins, we want those feelings, we want that norepinephrine, we want somebody else to take away the stress and the power of it all and to make it all go away and to make it better. And with a shit ton of chemicals, that can make us feel better for a little while. It doesn't actually solve the problem though. So sometimes stress asks for more stress because of the chemical match that it does. So when we are feeling generally stressed, we have got certain chemicals going on in our body, and we get a stress response. And we can get very used to those levels of stress, especially if we have PTSD or different stresses or complex PTSD, whatever we've got, or if we're used to some distress is good for us. So distress, a little bit, is actually called eustress, EU. So the stress that's good for us is eustress. When we get into distress that becomes too much and it's proper distress, then it's not good for us. What we also know, though, is with stress that it's the way we approach it and the way we see it that matters. Some people have this much stress and seem to handle it brilliantly, and some people have this much stress and can't handle it at all. And then we're all very much, fucking no, you haven't got as much as me, you should be able to handle it, or you're fucking kidding me. Like, so we get really harsh on people, but actually our resilience is something that we've learned, or it's epigenetic, it's been taught. The couple I was dealing with earlier, she shuts down and says, I can't deal with this. He says, fucking get on with it. Come on. I don't care if it's a broken leg. It's only a broken arm. It's only my leg that's dropped off. The real Black Knight, you know, from the Monty Python sketch. It's just a flesh wound. He goes there. She goes into total collapse. He thinks he's right. She thinks she's right. Guess what? They're both wrong. They're both doing a response that isn't particularly good for either of them. The balance is somewhere in the middle. And then you get drop, you said, Andy, as well. Yes, some people do, some people don't. And you can get drop from giving a thrashing, you can get drop from having a thrashing. Drop is not exclusive to submissives, it's not exclusive to pain. It really gets on my nerves that, not that you've said that at all, please don't take that personally. It gets on my nerves when people say drop is just for submissives and the top has to look after them. What a heap of shit that is. We all get dropped for different reasons at different times, and it's got nothing to do with BDSM. People get dropped from running a marathon. People get dropped from being in a show, from doing a concert. People get dropped. So we need to learn how to look after ourselves and negotiate for what we want, whether we're a top or a bottom. Cinder says the same reasons why some people turn to food, alcohol, drugs, exercise, etc. We crave a respite from the anxiety. Yeah, so actually what we're craving a respite from is from the physiological response in our own bodies and our own brains. So if we create something else, we're getting a respite from it. It also depends on if we ever taught how to manage our emotions, which is what I was talking about earlier, that actually we haven't learned distress tolerance, and that makes a real big difference too. You can get drop, Andy says, from topping too. I've experienced both. Look, Andy, I know that you've done amateur dramatics, haven't you, as well? So sometimes when you, let's say you're quite a big part in a show, or you're very involved in a show and you've helped set the scenery up and you've painted and you've helped decorate the hall. If you're in amateur dramatics, you've done everything. If you're in professional, of course, you don't do everything, but you're very involved in what you're doing and you're maybe on a run. When you stop and it just stops dead, you actually get dropped then as well. Oh, I really miss it. I want to go back. When's the next one? What can I do? And that is drop. That is drop happens to all of us. So I think trauma bonding, as I was saying, it can be a really trendy thing that we talk about. What is trauma bonding? What does it even mean? Well, it means that there's an attachment between an abuser and a victim. That's what trauma bonding is. So we get an abuser and a victim that become very intertwined with each other, and that we have psychological and emotional manipulation involved in that in some way, shape or form. And it creates a dependency from the victim to the person, to the perpetrator. And of course, that can be physiological, psychological, emotional, sexual. It can be very many ways. When it's involving psychological, it gets a lot harder to walk away. When somebody is violently abused, as in with violence, sometimes it's easier to walk away if there is no psychological abuse. However, that's very rare that pure violence happens in and of itself, or pure sexual abuse. Most people who are abusing or causing trauma to somebody else will use some form of psychological abuse as well to create a dependency, to create something. Yes, experienced it with some shows, Andy says. In Amateur Dramatics, you of course you do. Jerry, hello Jerry. What's the most common vanilla psychological term for what we call drop? And I call it drop. Do you know, down. I feel really down. I feel really low after being in the show. I really miss it. That's what people are saying. I feel really down. I don't know. I just feel, you know, when people use words like I feel lackluster, I don't feel like I've got any energy left. I feel a bit like, I just feel really sad that it's over. Those are the sort of terms that people use after a concert. You play, Jerry, you play musical instruments. Yeah, flat is a really good word, Karis. Thanks. That's another really good one. So all of those things, I just feel a bit, oh, I don't know. It's that sort of feeling. When somebody isn't feeling good, it's exactly the same sort of principle. So any of those. Do you think sometimes trauma bonding can sometimes start with someone trying to reenact trauma without being aware? Yes, I do. So who is more susceptible to trauma bonding? People with a dependent personality, people who've experienced trauma, people who feel emotionally insecure and don't feel very good about themselves, people who are reenacting trauma and look for somebody else to say, hello, I need some trauma, give it to me. That sounds awful. Sorry, we're splitting a bit, sorry, because of questions. Does your immune system get affected by drop? Yes. Of course, your immune system can be affected by drop. When we are low, or when we feel ill, or when we're not well, or when we start to feel very down and we're not looking after ourselves, it causes inflammation of some kind, and inflammation will always impact our immune system. So actually, it's really important to, again, I've got a writing on drop. I would have to look for it. I'm really sorry. It might take me a few minutes. But what I've got in that writing is what you need to eat when you've got drop and how you need to do it. It isn't sugar. It isn't, I see it in, you see it in doctors, you see it in tattoo places, you see it in other places. You give the child chocolate, you give the child sugar, or you give the human, you see it in dungeons and stuff. There's lollipops. Yeah, that will help get you through for an hour, but then fuck me, you will crash. And it's not healthy. Protein and carbohydrates, especially slow release long-term, are really key and very important. And I've written a whole piece on drop. Again, I would have to find it unless somebody else fancies finding it. Oh, thanks. You fucking awesome human. You're great, you lot. That's the writing on drop. And that tells you what to eat and how to do it and what will help you through that. So that makes a real difference too. So if you have some kind of history around abuse or trauma, you are more likely to enter into some kind of trauma bonding. I was looking for it too. Oh, thank you. You're lovely humans. If you have BPD, anxiety, stress, you are more likely. If you have an unhealthy attachment or separation anxiety, you are also more likely to be involved in some kind of potential trauma issue or trauma bond being created, because you've been there before. Oh, thank you very much. I like anyone who's got my back. That means a lot to me. So we can identify and we know that it's wrong, the situation that we're involved in. And we can see it logically, but the connection between here and here doesn't happen. I know I've got to go, but I can't go. I know this isn't right, and I have to stay. And that's the problem. So that healing from that sort of trauma is really, really difficult. There are 7 stages of trauma bonding, roughly, that we have to look out for. Now, look, I have a real problem with the term narcissist. I really do have a problem. People know this about me when they listen to me talk. People overuse the word narcissist, the same as they overuse the word trigger, all of these and gaslighting. That's one of the other ones. Like, these words are overused. There cannot be that many narcissists in the world. It would not function or survive. There are toxic relationships. There are people who have narcissistic adaptations and have narcissistic aspects. That doesn't make them a narcissist. Someone just said to me, my ex has NPD. Do they have diagnosed NPD? Is that absolute? Because again, that's another term. Okay, so that's really different. If someone's diagnosed with a narcissistic personality disorder, it doesn't always mean that they're going to be a cunt either. You know, it doesn't mean that they're really horrible people. There are plenty of people with NPD who do have functional relationships, but they're not quite the relationship maybe that you would want. They're doing something for a different reason in a different way. People should just say self-absorbed. People should say toxic. Cosmopolite just said self-absorbed. People should say a lot of things, shoulds, that comes into it, but it does get thrown away and thrown around and thrown about way too much. So some of the words I'm going to use are related to narcissism that people put together, but it doesn't mean that those two always go together. And then that person just said he was toxic and at the time undiagnosed ASD. ASD will have nothing to do with narcissism, and it will have nothing to do with toxicity. It really won't. They are very separate things. I would also argue that it takes two to be toxic. It's not a one-person thing. Abuse is a one-person thing. I choose to do something awful to you. Toxicity happens between two people, like a whirlwind, like a whirlpool, where two people get involved in something that's really not very nice and they become toxic. Toxic is often about two people. Abuse is often about one person. Does that make sense? You've got a perpetrator and a victim. Or in toxicity, you've got two people booming, as they say. So let's talk about the 7 stages just before we end of trauma bonding. The first stage is probably going to be love bombing of some kind, where somebody, creates a we, makes it all lovely. They might buy you a present, they get everything right for you, they're kind, they're sweet. Abusive is definitely a better word. Yeah, because toxicity is very different to abuse. It really is. So, that love bombing is really dynamic and we love it. And other people can see it. Felix, I've met exactly one true narcissist in my lifetime. The person who abused me for 20 years is not NPD narcissistic, but has a lot of the features of it. Yeah, I'm really sorry to hear that, Felix. I think that's very true. Cinders, agree with Debs here again. I think completely when my father and mother were such a bad match for each other, very much a case of fire and gasoline. That's toxicity. That is well put. That is toxicity. Boom, 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 rather than I'm not playing, I'm fucking off. But we don't, because we're entrapped, we stay and we do these things. So love bombing is one of those things where everybody creates a we. It's very fast. They create trust and dependency. You can trust me. They test little pockets of trust and make them feel guilty if they question them on how that was. I don't know how you can do that for me. I love you so much. I don't understand why you're not thinking about that. And so doubts are healthy. If someone turns around who hasn't even met you yet and says something along the lines of, I can't believe you don't trust me, my answer would be, of course I don't fucking trust you. I don't even know you yet. How the fuck am I going to trust you? I trust you as much as I'll trust anybody, basically. So it's really difficult. So, they do a lot of discounting at this stage. And you get a lot of flack for it, a lot of aggression. I can't believe you've done that for me. Once they've got your trust, the third stage is criticism. So they start to pick at you. They start to have a go at some of the things that you're doing. And criticism is really clever here, because we go into that stage where we say things like, oh my God, I'm sorry, you're so right. I don't even know why I questioned you. Or, God, I can't believe you still like me, even though I'm really a horrible person. So fuck me, it becomes really twisted. So they have to develop the trust before the criticism comes in. And then the criticism completely becomes about the victim over apologizing because everything is their fault because of the criticism. So that's about stage 3, and that's harsh and horrible. We then get into stage 4, which is much more about manipulation and gaslighting in some way, shape or form. Gaslighting and manipulation are overused situations and overused words for a start, but it is psychological abuse to gaslight somebody. Just because you disagree with somebody and they say that you've remembered it wrong and we have an argument about something and I'm telling you, no, you're fucking wrong, that's not the way it was. I'm not gaslighting you, I'm disagreeing with you and I'm holding on to my own opinion. And then the gaslighting is to actively think somebody is fucking mad for getting it wrong and not remembering it correctly. We question our sanity. Arguing with somebody and disagreeing and saying, no, you're being such a cunt right now. You're so horrible. You always do this to me. That's not gaslighting. That's a fucking good old fashioned argument where you're both being twats and not being very nice to each other. Gaslighting is actively making someone feel insane and questioning their sanity and their memory. Oh, thank you for that message. That's really sweet. So that's really different. Manipulation and gaslighting are psychological forms of abuse. Gaslighting isn't people disagreeing. It isn't. I'm sorry. That's an argument. And that's about you. I remember listening to my daughter and her partner having an argument around the bin. And Brian was saying to Andy, no, you didn't. He went, yes, I did. She went, you didn't. He's like, but I did. I know I did. She went, but you didn't. Now you could argue that she's gaslighting or he's gaslighting. You fucking all bang, bang. And I turned and I said to them, guys, sorry, I'm really bored by this conversation. One of you's got to add something for it to prove a fucking point. Seriously, you're not going to get anywhere. And they both laughed. And Brian said, do you remember when this happened and that happened? And then that happened afterwards? He went, yes, I did. I'm really sorry. That's not gaslighting. That's a disagreement. And even if we turn around and say, you're fucking mad, you haven't remembered it properly, didn't, that's perspective. It's fucking disrespectful and it's rude, but it isn't gaslighting. So gaslighting really is quite horrific. And we never get anywhere good or beneficial when we're arguing against the gaslighting. Stage 5 is when the victim becomes very resigned, starts to give up. And do you know what? You're right. So we start to fawn. We start to say, yeah, whatever you think. Yeah, no, totally. We give up that chutzpah, as the good Jewish people say. She says, being one of them, we give up that strength and that energy that says, no, you're wrong. So we lose the will to fight. We become very resigned and we give into it. And that leads to us losing ourselves. That leads to that complete loss of who we are and what that means. And then, of course, what we're desperate for, because we've now destroyed the other human being, I feel destroyed and I feel really awful. And I've gone so low. The only way that I can get back up, the addiction to this cycle, which is the 7th stage, is please, would you love bomb and gaslight? Please, can we go again? And that's also, if you think about that reenactment around trauma, what Bessel van der Kolk says as well. So what that question was earlier is, can people who are gaslit, can people who are abused, can people who have problems look for this again and create it in their lives? The answer is yes. Not because it's an addiction, as in it's not just the chemicals. It's also that I feel so low that the only way that I will feel good about myself will be is if you love bomb me and we start again. Holly says, I've had arguments with people about what gaslighting is at uni, but nobody ever cares what I have to say since 120,000 TikToks prove me wrong. So what do I know? And the problem is, you are right, Holly. I mean, it is shocking. Apparently, too many of us now look to TikTok as to what news we're going to get as our main focus of news. There are many really good articles on it. And I would also say, the one thing I say when somebody says, no, gaslighting is this, and I say, oh, okay, do you know what? I'm really fascinated. I want to learn more. Could you teach me what's the provenance of gaslighting? And then I shut up. So provenance means the history. Well, what do you mean? What you know a lot about it. Where does the term come from, gaslighting, and why do we even have it? Like, I'd love to know more. Can you tell me? And shut up. They can't tell you, most of them. TikTok is not the answer. It's quite a modern phrase, but it's a modern phrase in the 20th century. It is the title of a play and it's the title of a film. And actually, that's when it was first started, because that play and that film are about somebody, a man who makes a woman feel utterly mad. But the only thing that makes her realize that something could be going on is because the gaslight flickers. But he's trying to make her feel insane so he can get her committed, so he can get her inheritance. Look, if somebody can't tell you that and somebody can't expand on that, doesn't understand what it's like, and then we've got to play dumb a little bit, and it's beautiful. Say, I'm sorry then. So if gaslighting is about making someone feel insane, if I disagree with you and tell you you're wrong because I remember it differently, how does that make you feel insane? And just sit back, just play that game, because people really get into that. About words misuse, Harada says, why people say codependency when it's usually just dependency? Again, agree with that one. Yes. So yes, there are so many. Well, we're codependent. What do you mean by codependent? What does codependent mean? What does it look like? What are you saying there? And I think it's really important. There are some really good books like Codependency No More. Actually, we've got bookworms here. They'll have a whole shit ton of them, won't they? But so, you know, we've really got to, what is a codependent relationship even? It's somebody who buys an alcoholic alcohol. It's somebody who needs that other person in their lives to make that work. It's about this, where two people rely on collapse. It's very different. It's not the same. So but people say, oh, I'm codependent on that person. No, you're dependent on that person. A lot of people use the word codependency when they just mean dependency. So yeah, it's a form of addiction, really. It's very mutually destructive, put it that way. So anyone got any final questions before I wrap up for the night? Because I feel like I've been talking forever. I've been talking for 2 hours. Anyone got anything they'd like to ask, or would anyone like anything covered in the next workshop, which will be in 2 weeks? What would anyone like done in any way, shape or form? I'll take some notes. And if you don't, I'll put it out there again. I'll find a subject, or we can talk about something else as well. Over to you, type away. I'm mentally running through my books. Codependency often crops up in the trauma books. Yeah, has discussed it. And I would say Codependency No More, and a couple of books like that. They're really good. If you're not sure about books and you want to find out about books, of course, I haven't read them all. I have read an awful lot of them. That doesn't mean I've read them all. So if you can always write to me and say, Deb, I need a book about this. What do you think? I'll give you a list, because they're out there. And I've often got a list of books for different things, from things like codependency, from things like being diagnosed with something, on all of these things. It's really important. So if you have something or you want to ask, please ask. And then I can always go to my own books, make sure I have a look and do that. Been a great workshop again, Debs. Lots of good discussions tonight. Thank you, Andy. Such an awesome workshop tonight. Thank you. Thank you, Emily and Cuthbert Bear. Thank you both very much. Does anybody want anything specific for the next couple of weeks, in 2 weeks' time? Or would you rather I came up with something? Or do you want it to be open questions? Let me know. Can you talk about push and pull in relationships and how to avoid it to create a secure attachment? Can you define push and pull for me? What do you mean? And how to create a secure attachment? I can. Secure attachment. Magnets, attracting and repelling. That smells of mental health issues more than anything. So have a look. So, okay. How to flirt with social anxiety. I think I've just covered that a little bit, actually. It's about exposure more than anything. And that's what social anxiety is. But so I can cover that in a workshop, how to flirt. I can do that with or without social anxiety. I'd like to think for a workshop, but we'll have a think and drop you a message. Thank you very much. Cinder said, so if you're not wanting to buy books, have a look. Yeah, I really agree with that podcast, trauma therapist specialist. Also, I'd argue that there are some really good courses out there nowadays. They're advertised on social media by all these people that we've been mentioning, where you get some of their stuff, like Dan Siegel does a load at the moment, Gable, Bessel, there's a few others as well. There really are. There's some really good courses out there. I have military PTSD and social anxiety. May I know a book, or could this be a topic? It can definitely be a topic. And I'm still going to say to you, Sir Saul, if you have PTSD, especially if it's military, I would really hope that you're getting some kind of support and help. If you're not, can you afford to see someone? Can you go and sort that out? Because military PTSD is a real speciality. I see someone at the moment who's part of the military and has very serious PTSD and CPTSD, and we're working on a lot of aspects on how to handle that. And the military will eventually turn around and help him, but the waiting list is up to 8 months. 8 months for people who have done service for our country and who do service for our country. It's really shocking. Thank you again, Debs. You really are one of the superstars on the FET scene. Oh my gosh, thank you very much, Mr. P. Thank you. Publishing a useful book list. Do you know what? We could look at that, couldn't we? That might be a really good idea, because a while back I did, how about I put a thread out saying, what would you say are really good books about mental health and that really help us? And then we could get a whole thread going and we can section it as well. I once did a thread ages ago about what are the best kinky films, and I think there are like thousands of films on there now. It's crazy. So I could definitely do that, because I know I've got a bit of traction. So I will have a look at that, and I put that out there. Mr. P, that's a really lovely thing of you to say. I really appreciate that. There are really, really good courses. How to flirt while still being true to yourself. So should we do flirting? So flirting seems to be overhyping who you are. I really agree with that. So Saul, reach out to me if you need to as well. Come and write to me. Write to me a bit and we'll see if we can get there. So Leather Lioness is going back to that push and pull. One person interested in investing while another has less interest, and that flipping when that less invested partner is in. I really understand what you mean by that now. So you go too far towards, and then when you pull away, the other person gets more interested. I mean, that's negging and all sorts of other things. It's interesting. Awesome time. Thank you, Barbers. That's Barbs. That's really nice of you. Cosmopolite, I collect a fuck ton of resources. Feel free to message me on Fet. Yeah, no, I might do. We could do a joint piece on that, couldn't we? Opal for awesome again. Glad I managed to log in. It's been far too long since I managed to. Oh, thank you very much. That sounds like a great idea. As soon as I'll have 40 plus books to start the list with, Debs. Me too. I don't know if you can see it. Can you see that bookshelf over there? That one? Those are my non-online books on psychotherapy and counselling. I have another bookshelf over here that have some, but that's my main set of books. And I've probably given away about 100 books over the years as well. So I used to do a lot of supervision, used to supervise a lot, and I often give away books to my supervisees, never get them back. So yeah, and I've got an awful load of books online. Andy also says, your books aren't very well organized. They bloody well are. They're fucking alphabetical. Thank you very much. I paid someone else to do it. Because I fucking couldn't be bothered. How to discuss how bringing in play partners. What do you mean, Andy? Do you mean converting vanillas? What do you mean by bringing in play partners? I'm writing this on post-it notes. People are going to think I'm fucking mental if they look at my post-it notes. They are very well organized. Actually, they're not. There are a few chucked on the top. Alphabetical, no. Large to small and back again per shelf. I'll tell you what I really like in people's houses. I'm talking shit now, so this isn't therapeutic. If anyone wants to fuck off, feel free. I love it when people color coordinate their books. So they're really lovely. So you've got all the white books, all the green books, all the blues, all the blacks. Oh, okay. So do you mean bringing in a third or a fourth? Or do you mean going poly and opening up your relationship? Because I can cover that. One day I would get something I will never have heard of before, and I'm going to have a complete panic attack. No, a third or a fourth. So a unicorn. So opening up a relationship to a third or fourth. Do you know what? I think that's one of the hardest things to ever manage to do, because that couple's privilege is really hard. 70s psych rock bands, I've asked for that before. I mean related, come on, a little bit. My books are organized by theme style, not size or color. I would love to. There isn't a lot of color coordination, isn't there? I'd love all the white books, all the yellow books. I think that looks really cool in a house. I would never be able to find anything. Somebody said, made a joke the other day, and I said, give me something I've never heard before. How fucking contentious and anal and in my own head is that? Bloody ego. And somebody said, cover cannibalism. And I thought, I could as a fetish. It is a fetish for some people. Do the work, I'll pour the water. I'm sure Jerry and myself will happily pour water over your head to help your panic attack. Thank you very much. Wet t-shirt competition. Great tits, still upright. Don't knock it for a 57-year-old, whatever. If I take my bra off, they're not dropping around my ankles yet. Do you know, once my eldest daughter, Darcy, got into the bath with my mum, and they called my mum Mama because my mum died last year. And Darcy turned around and said to her, because I think Darcy was about 3 or 4, and I walked in, and we've got an open household, like we're not particularly shy around being naked or anything else as well. And Darcy looked at my mum and she said, Mama, do all old women have floppy boobies? My poor mum, she just went, oh God. I know how she feels. I mean, say just impact play partners or rigging, non-sexual. Oh, that could be more or less complex. Okay, so just play, not sex. Okay, these are all things I can look at. I'll make something happen for the next few weeks. Thank you very much for your time. I never ask for money. If you want to donate a coffee, KOFI, I'm the Kink Shrink. If you want to donate on Patreon, I'm the Kink Shrink. You really don't have to. I'm really happy doing these things for free, and they will carry on the same as I do a 90-minute workshop nowadays on what's it called? London Alternative Market as well, which is also online. So all these workshops go onto YouTube, and they also go onto FetLife now. And hey, I might even do that podcast one day, who knows? Anyway, the dynamics of non-sexual kink. What, as a workshop? Dynamics of non-sexual kink. You can tell I like stationery. I really like writing. Debs, you are our kink superstar and we love you. Thank you very much. I don't think I'm a kink superstar. I don't think I wouldn't know what a fisting feels like anymore. I think I'd be lucky if I sat in a fucking tangerine and it would fit. I'm not that type. Thanks, Debs, for another amazing workshop. Hopefully I'll get to LAM. Oh, that'd be really lovely. We'd love to see you. I'd love to see you. That'd be really lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time, and I will see you all soon. Take care. See you later. Bye. Wanker wave. Look like a bunch of twats if you're here. Thank you.